Can you hear me okay? Can you hear us in the back? Okay. Let us know if you need us to be louder. We'll try and read your hand signals. Well, Vo, it's such a pleasure to be in conversation with you. As Daniel said, I've seen your work in various installations, exhibitions, and I've always enjoyed that quality of being able to see your work on an intimate scale, but also on this grand scale. And I think it was late winter of last year when I did a studio visit with you. It was myself and our amazing fellow Tina Wilder, who's not here today, but we got a chance to go to your basement and be in your studio. You had the sofa that was upholstered with the U.S.-Vietnam uniform that we got to sit in very comfortably, and it almost felt like a soundscape sort of room because of all the fabric and the weavings that were in your studio. They were on the floors, they were rolled up, it was everywhere, and it felt very tenuous to walk in your space because I wasn't sure, was I allowed to touch, and everything, it's very tactile material. So I remember being introduced to your work in that way, and it was a really lovely studio visit, and I learned so much about you. But since that time, I've also learned that your practice is so much more than the things, the making of things, but it encompasses also caregiving, it encompasses education, it encompasses these other ways of community building and well-being. And I love and really admire thinking about your practice in these larger ways of how you move in space. So thank you for that. So I just wanted to kind of maybe talk about some big things, and then maybe we can get more into the weeds about the specificity of your works. I took some notes just in case. So the title, Everywhere and Nowhere, you said it was a quote drawn from the idea of the adult third culture kids. I had never heard of that, where the idea is that home is everywhere and nowhere, where one has lived their formative years in a culture different from their parents' home country. This resonates with me, and I thought it was a really kind of interesting way of thinking. I think in my upbringing, it was always about thinking about displacement. But I think this is a more positive and more nuanced kind of reflection on what it means to be third culture kid. Were you thinking of this theme as you were putting together all the works, and can you talk more about that theme?
Thank you. So I keep kind of grinning because this is like very, awkward. I'm kind of nervous, and so I just, if I break into a smile, it's because I'm really nervous. But hi everybody, thank you for coming. Thanks for sharing time and space. So yeah, the show's called Of Everywhere and Nowhere. It's from a Wikipedia entry about third culture kids, and I think the official definition of a third culture person is someone who, usually there's some kind of forced displacement or forced migration involved in displacing the family members, and then they kind of settle in a place, and then there's a third. Then they all go to a third place that none of them are from, including the kid, right? So then I think people who have grown up in military families or like different types of results of imperialism result in this kind of existence where you the door there is like you're on the threshold, or you have one foot in one place and another foot in another place. But I think it's kind of thinking. What I was thinking about was kind of an influx of Ukrainian, refugees, and also the future influx of Palestinian other refugees, because there's kind of this continual cycle that happens when there's intervention, military intervention, or there's like different types of imperialism at work, right? So kind of thinking about the cycle starting over and over again, and how that continues to create these displaced experiences throughout generations that kind of, and how that maybe interacts with intergenerational trauma, but it's this like accumulative experience that I'm trying to describe, but also like share about, maybe from a personal lens. And there's another layer to it too that I guess I'll talk about later, but that's kind of the beginnings of the way of thinking around culture and home, and then how that's really complicated by capitalism and like different forms of globalization. So I'll stop there.
Well, I was also thinking about landscape in terms of your relationship to it. So you were born in New Zealand, spent some time in Australia too, and then I don't know where else in between, but we have you here in Portland now for the past decade. How have these landscapes affected your way of seeing and also your way of working?
Yeah, I feel like I can't separate a landscape from like when we think about place and placemaking and location that's imbued with culture, history, stories of generations of different types of violence and oppression as well. So we have places rather than, for me, like an aesthetic landscape. So when I think about I've lived in this is the 8th country I've lived in. So I've lived in New Zealand, Australia, Nepal, Vietnam, Mexico, UK, and Germany, and I moved here from Germany. So I lived in Berlin for 5 years and then I moved to the States. And all of that, in a short version, is while I was waiting for my green card to come through. So that's why I was like wandering around being like, when this is going to happen? I applied when I was 8. It took over 30 years to So, and that's, my parents have lived in the States for over 20 years. So I was separated. And then my grandparents have lived here, or did live here from when I was 8. So I was separated. Long story, won't kind of go into it, but the long version, the intergenerational story of like Vietnam refugees. So we all started in the same refugee camp on the beach in Thailand, and then the administration, there's like a business card in there from the administrator that separated that family into 5 different countries, and so I had to float around to like be reunited with both my parents. Long story, but the point is that when you are told that somewhere is temporary, then you have a different relationship to that place, and when you're told for over 30 years something is temporary, then that changes the way you kind of operate and like even move through the world. So that's the best thing I can describe around like my relationship with place, and then this weird like kind of full stop at the end of the sentence of like, oh, I'm here now, but what does that even mean, right, to me? And then the other part of that is in maybe experiencing all these different realities, kind of seeing that all human concerns are the same, right? So like in the end, like everyone's concerns are the same. And then on top of that, we have like histories and like stories of how economics impacts things over generations. So I'll stop there, but yeah, there's like observations that you make after 30 years of like living in rural Vietnam or living in rural Nepal, like, and then living in really major cities. You start to kind of see patterns, and you see also the harm that things bring.
Right.
Yeah.
How about the formative years with your parents? Those were in New Zealand and Australia?
Yeah, and Vietnam.
And Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay. So you described your parents as 2 refugee machinists.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this was a great artist talk you did with PSU's textile department.
Yeah.
And specifically in the context of they have both are refugees, have worked in sweatshops.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that? And
Yeah.
how your upbringing, your family unit impacted your way of seeing and doing and also being in the world?
Yeah.
Siblings too, like I always want to know, like, what did that unit look like?
Yeah, I was 19 before I got a sibling, so I grew up as an only child. I want to say something about refugee mindset, and I don't want to, again, like, I'm not trying to say, like, I know what it feels like to be a refugee in general, but I can say that I experience a particular type of refugee mindset, and that is to do with survival. It's to do with always running and never stopping, right? Even if you're stopped somewhere, you kind of still have that momentum and that inertia. And I think that part of that is like just finding work, you know, whatever that is given to you or offered to you. And even if it sucks, you just do it, right? And I know that people talk about immigrant mentality is kind of similar, the kind of hardworking immigrant like trope. But there's something about refuge specifically and running. And even, I don't know, there's this temporariness. So even if you're like at a job, you may stay there for 20 years, but it's known to be temporary. Everything is temporary. But so yeah, they were machinists. I would say my mum was a multi-machinist. You know, she worked through several different types of factories. When I was growing up in New Zealand, she worked at a carpet factory. She worked for like a bunch of, there's like a Gore-Tex company, Polytech. She worked at Polytech before it shut down in Massachusetts. But yeah, she has a very long resume of operating different types of really dangerous machinery as an unskilled labourer, as being paid way under minimum wage in Australia. It was a long story around that. And my dad was more like electronic machinery and stuff. But yeah, there's a lot here, and I don't want to state the obvious, but there is stuff around skilled and unskilled labor. There's, you know, exploitation, and there's people with incredible intellect who don't speak the language who get taken advantage of. So there's like those things that are imbued in that story, I guess. Yeah.
And how did what was that very much felt in the household too? Like this idea of always working. I know that, you know, being with immigrant families, like the idea of leisure is such a foreign idea.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what were some of those values that were instilled in you?
I think you see it in the room. Like there's like the industrious productivity mindset. There's a bit of scarcity mindset you might see. There's a sense of urgency in the horses. There's all these different types of survivor mentality, trauma, like realities that hopefully are evident in the pieces, especially I call it the trauma bench, but it's like the unsettled whatever bench. But yeah, I think it's a hard question when you're talking about there's different types of ways that intergenerational PTSD comes up. But in my household, there was a lot of, I would say, silences were the main, like, reality, because what you did spoke volumes and what you said didn't matter, right? So, yeah, I think this idea around capitalism and productivity, like being defined by a position or a job or a status, and what you could provide, right? Rather than like your character or your personality or your preferences or like your weirdness or
right,
literally
your individuality.
Yeah, none of that matters. It's really about what you can provide for everybody else. So yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one, but I would say that there's like different types of the way we understand capitalism. Like you can see it like in the billionaire capitalism. You can see it in like immigrant capitalism. Like there's really different forms of it,
right,
and different experiences of it and different understandings of it. Then like in the States, there's meritocracy where you're like there are people that really believe if you work really hard, you get what you deserve, and there are other people that fully understand that is untrue. But they're both kind of the same, they're sides of the same coin, right? And the same like myth that people build their hopes and dreams on. So that's kind of some of the things that household maybe experience involved. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
So much there.
And I'm trying not to like trauma porn y'all, just FYI. So I'm like trying to like stay over here and not be like, and then this happened, and then this happened. It was super bad, everybody. Yeah.
Well, maybe shifting a little bit, I met your TC2 loom.
Sure.
And I loved the story behind it too, because it was very happenstance, right? Like you found it on, was it a Craigslist post? Or?
Oh no,
No,
it
okay.
was very intense. It was a years-long process. It was very intentional.
Can you share about that? And also, the loom had a presence. There's a presence to
Her
it.
name is Grunhilde.
Okay.
And anyway, so like I had the show in 2021. I had designed this blanket in June of 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. It was an abolitionist painting, drawing. It was a courthouse being burnt in flames, and it says burning down. And then I posted it. I was like, I'm taking pre-orders for this. All the money from pre-orders is going to the Black Trans Fund. I got crap tons of pre-orders. I donated all the money. It was like almost $1,000, and then the company left a message on my voicemail like 2 days before I was going to send them all out. And the voicemail, I still have it, but it says like, I love playing it for people, but it's like, hi, we've finished production on the blankets, but we can't send them to you. We don't want to contribute to the problem in Portland over there, so we're not going to be able to give you these. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna get my own loom. So that's how I researched. Like, I was like, how do I make my own crap? Because I'm not letting other people control like what I make. And means of production is using control. So I researched like what would make sense, and then this Norwegian engineering company was the place to speak to, and then I laboriously ordered the parts, and then over 10 months built the thing, and then it's a really long process. But it wasn't. I wish it was crazy. It was so sweet. No, I had to pay tariffs from Norway, and like wait till 2 a.m. to call them and be like, this part seems to be missing, and then wait another 3 months when that part got shipped over. So it was like a long fun process. Yeah. But she's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like her. She's my friend.
Can you share a little bit about what that looming process is? Because it's a digital loom, but that doesn't mean you just put it all in the computer and leave.
Yeah.
The hand is still very involved.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that intimacy with this? What's her name again? Grunhilde.
Yeah. So like, can I see a show of hands of weavers in the room? How many people weave? I'm shocked. Normally it's like 60% weavers, but we've only got 3 today.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome. Okay, then I won't do the like weaving, because normally it's just the weaving conversation for the weavers, but what do I say? Okay, loom weaving. When weaving, you control what petals go up and what goes down, and that controls when you pass the weft through, what's visible and what's invisible. The Grunhilde, she's got a little brain that I tell which to lift and which to not lift, every single row. So that's what it does, and then I just do everything else. So it takes about a month full-time hours, so like several hundred hours to thread. It's miserable. It's like the most miserable, taxing thing. And I'm always super depressed by the end of that. And then I start weaving, and I'm like, oh, this is sick. I love this. So it's like many hundreds of hours just to set it up, and then lots of like pulling tension on 3,000 threads. And then I draw a picture, and I'm like, I like this picture, and then I have to translate the picture, translate every pixel into it. Telling the thing to go up or down. That's the best way I can describe it. And then I pick the pretty colors, and I touch the things, and I think that feels nice, and then I decide that's what's going to go into the weaving. Was that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So maybe this is going too much into the weeds, but I love the language, the warp, the weft, and the warp.
Yeah.
So is this
So the
weft?
warp is vertical and the weft is, so
Okay.
the way to remember it is right and weft.
So and the weft is the one that you're constantly.
But you can control what comes in the warp. So you like that Megan Smith is the person who helped me like figure out how to like map everything out pixely, and she hand dyes like all her warp, so it's like cool, very color and stuff as well. Yeah.
And then your wool, can you talk about that and why specifically wool, where it comes from?
Okay.
The materials.
Okay. So this piece I hand dyed from indigo. The wool is hand dyed from indigo. So some of this stuff is like hand dyed in different ways, but I would say that two things. One, my mum being a machinist in so many different textile factories and like just kind of like having a relationship with production, and then kind of feeling the difference between like a synthetic and a organic, I guess. And then two, my first job was at a wool store when I was 15, and it was open for 61 years, and people would call from like Canada, like old ladies from Canada would call and be like, I'm looking for an Annie Black from 1959. And then they would read out the dialogue and be like, this is the dialogue. Do you have that dialogue? And I'd go into the archives and then like rummage around. This place had no computers, no calculators. Like, it was awesome. So I think I built a love affair with like, just like being able, I can tell the difference between a dialogue. And I don't know if anyone's a knitter, but like, it's kind of a cool skill to like know the slight difference between a shade from one shade to another shade. But yeah, so it's like a color thing, and it's a texture thing, and it's a nostalgia thing, and it's a nerd thing as well. Like knowing, being able to touch, in that job, I started to know what everything was made from by touching it. So if I like touch someone's clothes, I usually can tell what's in it. And then the wool itself, like different animals feel different. So different sheep feel different. And yeah, you kind of like start to know like the Australian merino and the Peruvian like highland. Yeah. Sorry, was that too nerdy? That was a pretty nerdy answer. I'm sorry, but I really like wool. But it's not just wool. There's like silk and flax and like hemp and other stuff and bamboo and stuff.
Oh, that you use.
Yeah. But like primarily wool, because thanks animals, thanks sheep.
Yeah. Well, I just learned about pashma. Is
Pashmina.
Specifically from the belly of a
yak.
Is it a yak?
Well, there's like
Or
different grades of
yeah.
pashmina. If
It's
that's what
amazing.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you, animals, for sure.
Yeah, thanks animals.
I talked a little bit about scale. I think in your work, there's such an intimacy to your work, of course. I think maybe just it's inherent in a weaving process. You want to study the stitch or when I look at knitting or crocheting, there's that meditation on looking at those patterns and details. But there's also a monumentality to your work. There's a breadth to your work, and are you often negotiating between those two things? And where does this scale come from? This in relationship to you?
I don't know. I think that one, like, these are like punk comics drawings, right? So like these are drawings that I doodle in between like life, when life happens, right? So like there's something about the doodle, and then there's something about making the it's like music, right? Like you have the thought, and then there's something about making the thought really loud, like amplifying the thought. So you're like doodle, and then you're like, how do I amplify this into a like unreasonable volume? So I think that's where maybe what you're talking about comes from. And I don't think about that when I'm doing it. I'm just doing it because it's part of my survival of like make the thing, love making the thing, you know, whatever the thing could be. And again, like I started weaving in COVID. Like I had to drop music because I couldn't play shows anymore, and then I needed to survive by making something in my basement, and that's how I started doing it. So this is more about maintaining my sanity and like meditation in light of everything being so messed up everywhere, and like just like getting through the day. You know? And also, this is relevant somehow. I'm autistic, so like, hey, I'm autistic, and the work is pretty autistic in my opinion, which I like that about it. But I think intimacy and touch is like pretty autistic in the best possible way.
Right.
Yeah. Alignment, smells. Yeah, like feeling something slowly become a thing, like in your hands. Yeah. Okay. Did that answer your question at all?
It totally did.
Okay, cool.
I just the sensory thing too really gets me. So
oh yeah, okay.
I'm totally going on it. Oh yeah,
okay, totally. Yeah, so you get it. Like, so folks who aren't familiar with autism, like your life is a sum of your sensory needs. And so I only found out I was autistic like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, and I was like, oh, that's literally why I do everything. It's because I need to, I need to hear that, I need to feel that, I need to feel my body doing that thing in that moment. So that's why I do art stuff.
Yeah, there's also the scent for sure. I mean, there's so many sensory things that occupy this work. So how did you just describe your drawing as punk comics? Punk comics. For me, I think it's really interesting because they feel like surreal imagery. A lot of the works kind of float in space. I'm thinking about some of your earlier work too. These objects kind of float, but even the window, the door, it's an entrance and an exit, but to what realm, it's not very clear. Does surrealism come into your thinking process?
I don't think it does consciously. Like, I'm from an architecture background, and I would say I'm more from a brutalist background rather than a surrealist background. But like, I think people have asked me, so I'm just going to explain it real quick, is that these are all scaled. So like, it's the unit, the seat, the bed, the door, the window, the house, the city, the nation state, and the screen. So all of these are, right? So it's a scale, right? So like, when you are unsettled or like figuring out your identity or whatever the process that you're in is, there's like different scales of how those things impact you, I guess. So you are a unit, like an economic unit moving through space, but you're also like I don't know, this is really nerdy, and I'll try not to be super nerdy, but just so you know, there's a bunch of different references in each work, and some of them reference each other. But the bed is like 4 of my beds stitched together, like through time, and like 3 of my rugs through time, and like 2 of my dresses stitched together. But well, I've forgotten your question. I'm sorry. Was it about the comics thing?
Surrealism drawing.
Yes, yeah. I would say like, I don't mean to be dream statey, but some people have said the dream state thing. I think for me, like, I think it's more about like your experiences, like trying to figure out like who you are or where you belong, or if you belong anywhere, or if that even is real. And I think the screen is, I put that last because in the end, no matter where I lived, my home was like in my email account, or like, do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like, it's weird how like something untangible ends up anchoring you more than anything physical.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like horses have come out in your work.
Have they?
Previously, have they?
No.
Okay. Well, I see horses
true.
now.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you tell me about them?
So to me, they represent like a sense of urgency. I don't know. I think I just wanted people to feel what I was feeling, which was like the kind of like, where am I? What am I doing? Oh, I gotta go be, like kind of like that like state of, yeah, like I said, the sense of urgency, but also the sense of like being unhinged in a way, or like, just like kind of, yeah, I don't know. I can't explain it, and I'm not very good at explaining it, but I hoped that the feeling of a running horse could communicate, like that feeling of not really being able to be reined in or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think horses are so fascinating because they're prey animals. Is that correct? Prey animals, but they are so powerful in presence, and they're always larger than I think they are in person.
Yeah, and it's wild that they've been like, it's wild that how they've been treated, considered, I guess. But I think for me it's just a visual like tool to try to communicate like how something feels. Yeah.
I think you had mentioned in your earlier work, it's been more, or there was less color, but this show there's so much vibrancy. It's almost painterly. Have you been moving more into that direction, or is it?
No,
just
I mean I just love fluorescence anyway, and neons, and for me, like the one that Daniel's standing next to is like in fatigue colors, so like that was a real fight. I think I lived in 13 houses when I lived in London. 13 houses in 15 months, and so that is about just like leaving a place behind, leaving some stuff there, going to the next place, going and then building it out, and then being like, oh, go to the next place. And so that felt like not a fight, but we were literally battling like legal people. Like one of my homes got invaded. You can see it on the internet, but it got invaded at 7 in the morning by SWAT police on the morning of the wedding, the royal wedding. And two places I worked at also got our windows kicked in because they believed that we were going to do something terrible for the wedding, like we cared about a royal wedding. Anyway, so that's just, there's a lot imbued in that one, but it's really about a particular time of also just being really, really depressed. So the colors to me are kind of more about how each thing feels. But the chair one's kind of a stark like isolation. The bed one's like cozy, intimate space. The kind of franticness of the city. This is the pendulum swing of a two-party system plus puddle of blood. It's very subtle, everybody, but it's puddle of blood. Anyway, so, and then the binary code. The screen. Sorry, it's kind of almost nerdy as I say it out loud, and I apologize. But the colors are they coordinate with like the theme of each piece. Yeah. And my favorite one, which is the horse, the pink and purple horse, is in neon. And I love neon, but I saved it for that one because one, it's the last weaving I did on the loom for the show, and two, it's the most liberatory one for me. So yeah, it's kind of more around liberation, that piece for me.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? What are we looking at? Is it a bridge? And
it's cubist into modernist, like really soulless anonymous housing, and really soulless anonymous highways and byways. Okay. So something I've alluded to but I haven't spoken about is like the internationalism and the anonymity of large cities, right? So like many metropolis start becoming the same, or like start to blend into each other. So those two pieces specifically are kind of about the blending of identity and culture to the point where a lot of culture gets erased, and obviously a lot of like colonial places are like literally erasing like indigenous culture and people. So that's kind of the horse is like this thing in spite of that, or the liberatory piece is like the thing in spite of these forces that are really trying to stamp out individuality, history, like cement, whitewashing, like all of these things that we're familiar with, like literally but figuratively, kind of erases a lot of, indigenous culture. So I'll leave it there. I'm trying not to like go into it, but yeah. So
yeah. Can you talk about the bench?
Oh yeah.
And is it like, can you sit on there?
Well,
or is it
I originally
theoretical?
so I used to be a skateboarder and like hostile architectural, like we call them fun stoppers. So I wanted to do a trauma bench, i.e. like a fun stopper with a fun stopper area where you could not possibly rest on it and you could not possibly actually really do anything on that.
Right.
And it's got the first and last line of a poem that I wrote about. I wrote it right after my grandma died, but it's about the gridded city and like things looking the same from the outside, but once you get past the grid, you start to see the kind of suburban like drama, or like I don't know. It's like I can't explain it, but like maybe the poem's like in the folder. You can read it, but everything there is from my home. Some of it was seasoned for several years. I noticed the mushrooms and fungus have started falling off, but there's those bench tops were on my back porch for 4.5 years. And they're actually drawn, they're on one of the weavings too. So the bench, my back porch is on the screen. There's a part of that screen weaving. And the bench, there's 2 benches on it. But yeah.
And then sort of buried underneath, like I noticed an old passport.
There's 2 passports in there. There's my house keys, my driver's license. Yeah. I think it's an allusion to like how worthless and valuable the ability to be with your family members. Like as right now we have deportations happening under the current government and also under previous governments. So like these pieces of paper unfortunately allow people to have lives that are like fully realized or not. So I mean, I have in my head what I was doing. It's a diagram. The bench is a diagram, but I like feel nerdy sharing it, so I'm not going to share exactly what it's a diagram of. But I would say that most of my work is diagrammatic more than figurative. Yeah.
That really helps. And then you touched on architecture too, because that stood out to me. There's definitely an architecture quality. There's a lot about space. What is your relationship to architecture? Having moved a lot, having lived in so many places.
So in the United States, schools, prisons, and hospitals are traditionally made by the same people, and that tells you a lot about what the purpose of the learning institution is if it's being made by with the same authoritarianism as a prison. So I think, architectural, I would say the study of architecture started because it was a way for the state or the church to impose power on people, right? So if we understand architecture as another authoritarian power, then how do you like subvert that, or how do you play with that, or how do you point to it? So yeah, and brutalism to me is like the exposure of elements and the exposure of structure and the forms that kind of make up what we're doing. So that's kind of how I feel about like a lot of the work I'm trying to do. Sorry, I feel really nerdy saying a lot of the things out loud, and so I apologize. But yeah, that's.
I think this is good.
Okay, cool.
So would you say brutalism is maybe a more truthful form of architecture?
I think it's just more punk, like in the sense that like it's like here's the concrete that's completely unsmoothed out, or like here's the steel beam that's completely uncovered. So there's just something more. I don't know if honest is the right word. It's just more raw and maybe again questioning power or questioning like systems of authority. Yeah.
if this is too personal, say pass.
Yep.
But you've been in Portland for 10 years.
Mhm.
How is that feeling? Are you still, do you feel like, are you feeling grounded?
Portland's interesting, right, everyone? It's an interesting place. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
Thank you so much for
Oh my
asking these
gosh.
questions. I really appreciate it.
maybe we'll open it up. I'm sure you have so many more questions. I feel like, yeah, I could talk to you forever. And then, yes.
Two questions. You talked a little bit about like surrealism came up and a dream state. And one of the things that I keep going back to is that I feel like your work, like because they're basically trying to do so much about symbols and how you're using like symbols to like convey a narrative or more, maybe more of a story. And so I feel like the way you titled them and the way kind of just you were very specific about how you wanted the show to be installed, to a specific plan that fit a narrative. And so we haven't talked about it. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that. And then I also just want to say that I know the show and a lot of the things relate to very specific, very personal things for you. But I think that a lot of the some of the themes, not all, and all in different ways, but certain aspects to kind of feel universal, like in the sense that I know you haven't talked about it a lot tonight, but you talk a lot about obviously the refugee and immigrant experience or the BIPOC experience, but also kind of LGBTQ plus or queer experience. But a lot of the I heard you talk about it today, where it reminded me of some kind of queer theory conversations I had a zillion years ago in graduate school, talking about how queerness was a form of exile. And I just wanted to throw out like how those things maybe connect, or how you think of them as connecting. Those kind of two questions.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know anyone that feels like they're super chill and comfortable and belonging. You know, like I think that most at least folks that I'm close with have this feeling of exile that you just kind of described, or being othered, or being marginalized, or like, you know, this world is a very hostile box that a lot of us don't fit into. So, I mean, that's the best way I can like respond to that. And I think that I'm self-taught. I clearly don't know, like, my drawings are really like primitive in lots of ways, because like I didn't learn to art really. So I like being like an outsider artist, I guess, or like a weirdo who was like, I just like doing things and teaching myself, and maybe like outside of particular institutions, and kind of maintaining. I'm trying to validate not only my experiences but marginalized experiences in general, right? Like, I would say that's such a major purpose of everything I do, not just like visual stuff, but I'm like trying to remind people, like, not only are we out here, but we're the majority, and like we have a lot of power. We're pretty brilliant, and our brilliance is maybe told to us in a different way. You know, it's maybe retold to us like, that doesn't belong here, you shouldn't be here. But I'm trying to kind of just remind folks that no, your brilliance is super, not only welcomed, but it's needed right now. And that's what, you know, I have a workshop here on Monday for queer and trans folks under 25 and under, under 25. Like, I don't know, like that's, to me, like the most important part of anything that I'm doing, what regardless of what it looks like, or like what format it's in, is to just like, you might be told by institutions that you don't belong, or that you're not quite the status quo, but that's kind of your power, and like really live in that power. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's what I want to say.
What about the other
The symbols, I guess like coming from, again, it's partly architectural, but it's partly punk, it's partly tattoo culture, it's partly comics, it's like graphic design. There's a lot there, but politics is also symbols, right? In a consumer culture like ours, our identity becomes about symbols. Like, I'm not that, I am that, etc. So I think that even my last show, I have to deal, like kind of wheel and deal in symbols. And like sometimes maybe question them a little bit. Because sometimes we're, I think, over-reliant on assuming what a symbol means and actually trusting the symbol over the person or over the humanity behind the symbol. So I'm just gonna leave it at that, but symbols are important, but also need to be questioned a lot of time. Sorry I wasn't more specific,
No,
but I
no,
appreciate the question.
No, that's fine. I was thinking like you use like images of overpasses and freeways and houses and very specific kind of like iconic kind of images to sort of to share with your story or narrative.
Yeah.
Narrative is the right word. To conjure up a shared kind of, in some ways, kind of a shared experience. Like people, like if you ask a kid to draw a house, they draw something that's very simple. There's something that's kind of universal that symbolizes structure, or this a city, or your nation state when it has a Corinthian column in it. I mean, that every federal building in Washington D.C. has a Corinthian column. I mean, there's certain symbols that just sort of appear.
On the top of that column is an approximation of the Statue of Liberty flame as well. So, I mean, these symbols, they're sometimes unconscious, right? But they very much like live in our vernacular as represented. Like an overpass is not just something that people sleep under. It's not just a thing that gets erected because people don't know how to plan a city properly in a humane way. So they just keep piling these superstructures on top of each other. It's a symbol of a lot of dehumanization and that internationalism. So I think, again, wheeling and dealing in symbols because they speak maybe more. And again, maybe being autistic, I don't sometimes relate to like copious amounts of text, and I sometimes don't relate to even images of people, but I will relate to infrastructure, and I will relate to like objects as symbols. Yeah. But thank you.
I just wanted to ask, where did you source the wool from? Where did you source the fabric from?
Some of it's like, so a lot of it was given to me, or a lot of it is like post-waste, post-consumer waste. So like from scrap PDX, a lot of it is like people, a lot of my friends like have different versions they give me, and then I like spin it. But yeah, some of it's from Australia, some of it's from Peru, some of it's from New Zealand. But yeah, so it's an amalgamation of things that people give me, and then post-consumer waste. Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah.
Other questions? Please.
Yes.
Maybe you addressed this already, but I heard there was Easter eggs. What are the Easter eggs?
Thanks, Derek. I think like my backyard is in there. My bedroom's in there. The eel moving through the house is when my family's only ever kind of lived in, only ever so-called purchased like one house, and it was kind of the only place that that house is somewhat modeled on that house. But anyway, it's like the only place I kind of felt really at home in, and like really, and it's in New Zealand. It's in a neighborhood called Wainuiomata. But the eel, we had no furniture, and also didn't have that much money, so my dad would go to the local lake and catch eels. So we would eat that for dinner with white rice. And I was telling my friend here earlier that we would sit on the floor and put out newspaper, and then eat white rice and eel. So there's, there are like personal references, but I mean, yeah, these are IKEA diagrams. Because what, like, does anyone else relate to like moving to a new place and then like heading to IKEA? Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, there's like the references to like the iconic IKEA bed versus, I don't know, there's a lot of nerdy ones, but I'll just stop there. But I appreciate the question.
Yes, right there.
Could you talk about the song? Because I
Oh.
hear more about it.
Did you hear it as you came in?
I don't know if everyone got to hear, but I wanted you to talk about it because it is on the website.
Okay.
You told me about it. It's so personal, it's beautiful, but I am not going to pronounce the song title.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and we'll play it. We'll play it when we're wrapped up.
Okay,
Yes,
cool. So I overlaid audio from a bunch of different places I lived in. There's like at the end is a performance, a guitar performance I did in Berlin. The beginning is me and a couple friends in a military tunnel bunker. Yeah, so you can kind of hear different places. And the main chunk of the recording is my dad singing a traditional Vietnamese song. I recorded him playing in his living room 13 years ago. Yeah, and the song's called Em Không Buồn Nữa, Gita, which translates roughly to I'm not sad anymore, big sister. But like, it's kind of an oxymoron because Vietnamese culture and art in the last 50 years since the fall of Saigon is so synonymous with sadness. And I'm always like, can we just be something else other than sad? Why are we always sad? But like, there is just like musically, filmically, like literally every representation of Vietnamese culture can only live in a post-war sadness. It's exhausting. So that's kind of a reference to that. There's other kind of tidbits in there too. But I love that piece, and I really hope people can hear it because to me, like, it introduces the work a little bit. And there's like, you can't tell, but under the bench is like some camo from the Vietnam War era, I should say, or the American War in Vietnam era. So yeah, there's like little references to kind of getting over this like identity block that happens when you're Vietnamese in the United States, which is like being defined by a war that you might not have any part in, or like that we're kind of past it. Yeah.
First off, hi, thank you so much for being here and for the show. I want to say I was very struck by you using the notion and like using third culture kids.
Of what?
Third culture kids.
Oh yeah.
As a way to like start this.
Yeah.
And I think that's because the third culture kids that I'm familiar with have been agents of imperialism themselves instead of being like victims of it.
Totally.
And so again, people, like kids of expats, very rich, refuse to learn the language,
Yeah.
all in all of these places.
Yeah, like I said, military.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering how you navigate that label, that notion in one, a majority white city, a majority white nation, and just like how that evokes different things in different people depending on where.
This is how I negotiate it. Because like you know, how do you negotiate? I'm a settler colonizer on indigenous land. Like, how do I negotiate that? Like, you know, you just do the best you can to have, like, to provide education and to have these real conversations each day. Yeah, I think that like you said, I think there's no, how do I say this? Everyone is something and something. No one is just one thing, right? So that's kind of what I like about that term, is that it is more than one thing. I'm not trying to even paint, like we're not, like my family are not victims. They're refugees, but they're not victims. They were, like my maternal side were capitalists, and then they were, you know, they were occupied by communists. Like, I'm not saying, it's not black and white, right? So that you got to negotiate like all the different sides of the complications of being alive in different economies or in different geographies. But I think this is how I negotiate it, to answer your question. Yeah, but yeah, I appreciate it. Did I answer your question? Okay, cool.
We have time for one more question if there is another one.
Yeah.
And I think about energy like entropy, like those out.
Mm-hmm.
What are you listening to, watching, thinking about?
You don't want to know.
I want to know.
Love is Blind, The Bachelor. We cannot go there. Like the most bottom of the barrel. Like that's privilege, right? Like, yo, I can watch the worst reality TV because it's part of my job now. Like it's got to be stuff that cannot challenge me anyway. I don't have any desire to look at the screen, but it's like lightly comedic enough that I can like chuckle at it while I'm doing something that I actually care about. I can't believe, yeah. So like truly the worst, like the worst examples of culture that this society can provide. I'm like that's coming in, and this is what's coming out.
Buồn nữa chị ơi, em không buồn nữa chị ơi, vì đau thương quen rồi tìm quên trong nụ cười, vẫn yêu đời vẫn thương người nỗi